Hey guys, we are going to look at one last set of problems, and it is when we are factoring when there is a greatest common factor. And so I just want to look at two examples with you. I'm going to have you try one on your own, and then that will be it. So when we are factoring with a greatest common factor, it's exactly like what we do when we normally factor. The one thing we have to do first is to take out that greatest common factor. Now, taking a look at my examples, again, make sure you pause the video and write them down. Taking a look at my examples I have here, notice they're not how we usually see them. See how my exponents are not in order from highest to smallest, right? Biggest to smallest. So we want to do that first. We want to go ahead and rewrite these first, because that is how our brain is used to seeing them. So I want to take my biggest term first with my biggest exponent, and I want to write that first. Now be careful, because whatever sign is with your number needs to go with it. So for example, I'm going to bring a negative 2x cubed with me out front. All right, my next highest exponent is this x squared. Again, whatever sign is with my number, I need to bring with it. If you're not doing that, you're going to mess up your whole problem. And then last, 12x, and this is a positive 12x, so I'm going to go ahead and write plus 12x. See, now we have it from highest exponent to lowest exponent. This is how your brains are used to seeing it. So I would suggest every single time, if it's not already in order for you, to go ahead and rewrite it in order. So next step we want to do is to go ahead and find our GCF to then allow us to be able to factor this. So greatest common factor, I need to look at all of my terms and see what goes into all of them. So looking at all of these numbers, these are all divisible by 2. So 2 is my greatest common factor, but careful. If we divide this by just 2, so negative 2 divided by 2, that would leave me with a negative 1 out front. And we do not want that. We want a positive, make a note to yourself, you want a positive A value when we go to factor. So instead of just taking out a 2, I'm actually going to take out a negative 2 here, because negative 2 divided by negative 2, that's going to get me a positive 1 for my A value there. All right, take a look at your x's. Is there anything in common with our variables here? We have 3 x's here. I have 2, and then I have 1 here. So looking at all of my x's, they all share 1. So I'm going to bring that x out front with me. And then I'm going to go ahead, divide, and figure out what's left. So negative 2 divided by negative 2, that's where I got my 1. I had 3 x's, and one of them went outside. So now I have x squared. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 will get me a positive 5. This is where signs are super important. If you miss that negative here, it's going to mess up your factoring here. I had 2 x's, but one of them went outside, so I only have 1 left. All right, positive 12 divided by negative 2 will get me negative 6. And my x went on the outside, so I don't have any x's left there. And now if we cover our GCF up, this is just like what we did in our previous video. We have a quadratic here that we can go ahead, jump into our T-chart and factor. So we're just going to ignore this GCF here for a second. And we're going to do our T-chart. So it multiplies to get me negative 6 and adds to get me positive 5. Okay, so again, use that multiplication table if needed. Okay, but what multiplies to get me negative 6, I've got options of 1 times 6, and one of them needs to be negative. So I can have a negative 1 times 6. That will get me negative 6. And when I add these together, that will get me a positive 5. So as a reminder, these become my factors. X minus 1, x plus 6. But we're forgetting something. If you remember, we need to bring that GCF with us. So my factored form here would be negative 2x times x minus 1, x plus 6. This right here is our factored form. That's our answer. If you don't bring your GCF with it, it is wrong. Got to bring that with it. All right, let's look at number 2 here. So again, first step, let's go ahead and rewrite this in order. So highest exponent, negative x to the third, positive 8x squared minus 15x. Notice I kept those signs with my terms. All right, let's go ahead and look. We want to find our GCF first. So looking at my numbers, nothing goes into all 3 of these other than 1. But careful, we need a positive a when we divide this out. So I actually need to take out a -1 here as a GCF, because then that will turn this to the positive. Taking a look at my x's, they all share 1. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that out front. And then when we divide this out, we're going to get x squared minus 8x plus 15. So again, divide this out. -1 divided by -1. I took 1x out, so now I only have x squared. 8 divided by -1, now that turns it to a -8. I had 2 x's and I took 1 on the outside, so I have 1 left. -15 divided by -1 gives me a positive 15 now, and that x went on the outside, so I don't have any x left there. All right, jump right into your T-chart. What multiplies to get me 15? That will add to get me -8. This one's a little bit trickier because we need to add to get a negative. So 3 times 5 gets me 15, and that would add to get me a positive 8. But let's see here, if I make both of these negative, a negative times a negative is a positive, and then when I add these together, that actually does get me -8. So my factors would be x minus 3, x minus 5, and bring your GCF with it, -1x out front, or just -x. All right, guys, go ahead and pause the video, write down this third example, and give it a try yourself. Remember, your first step should be to rewrite this in highest exponent all the way down to lowest, and then look for your GCF from there. When you're ready to check your work, go ahead, press play, and go from there. All right, hopefully you have tried this one on your own. We want to go ahead and rewrite this in order. So 3x to the third minus 54x squared plus 240. With a GCF here of 3x, you are not always going to get a negative GCF. We already had a positive a value, so we can leave it positive. So 3x is my GCF. When I divide that out, I get this. Set up your T-chart. So what multiplies to get me 80, that adds to get -18. X minus 10, x minus 8, bring your GCF with it for your final answer here. All right, guys, this is our refresher on factoring, so please make sure you use these notes to help you on the practice problems. You want to write them in factored form. You're not finding your x-intercepts. All right, guys, have a good rest of your day. Please let me know if you have any questions.